The Galactic Council's message spread like wildfire across the known universe. A bounty had been placed, not just any bounty, but the largest in recorded history. The target was human. That alone was enough to make heads turn. Humanity, a minor species in the grander scheme of the galactic hierarchy, had never produced a being worth such an exorbitant price. They were resourceful, stubborn, and tenacious, but never a true threat. And yet, the Council had declared this one individual an existential anomaly. The bounty was clear, dead not alive. No negotiations, no exceptions. It took less than a day for the greatest hunters in the galaxy to mobilize. Drex Varn, a cybernetically enhanced Jari mercenary, received the notification while finishing a contract on the stormworld of Realm. He wiped the blood from his blade, barely acknowledging the corpse at his feet. The sum offered for the human was more than he'd made in his last 10 years of killing. He relished the challenge. Cerna Vex, a reptilian warlord with a fleet of privateers, gathered her lieutenants and began issuing orders before even finishing the message. Information was power, and she intended to learn everything about this human before anyone else. From the shadows of the drifting station Helios 7, a figure known only as Whisper accepted the contract. No one knew Whisper species, nor had anyone seen their face, but where Whisper went, death followed. And these were only a few among the thousands who wanted the prize. Rumors spread in the darker corners of the galaxy. Some believed the human was an escaped war criminal. Others whispered that he was an experimental superweapon gone rogue. A few dismissed the entire thing as a ploy by the Council to manipulate the bounty system. But no matter what theories arose, one truth remained. The hunt had begun. The first Real lead surfaced on a desolate moon orbiting a dying star. A small listening post, abandoned for years, suddenly broadcasted an encrypted signal. It lasted only 3 seconds before vanishing, but it was enough. Experts analyzed the frequency, dissected the residual energy signature, and reached a conclusion. Human technology. Drex was the first to arrive. His ship, the Void Claw, cut through the moon's thin atmosphere with a predator's grace. The station's power flickered erratically, half consumed by time and neglect. He stepped inside, boots crunching against frost-covered metal. No bodies, no sign of struggle. Just dust and silence. Then he saw it, a single phrase scrawled onto the wall in a language older than any empire. Leave. A lesser hunter might have hesitated. Drex didn't. He activated his visor, scanning for anomalies. The air held traces of human DNA. Recent. He was close. Before he could investigate further, a voice crackled through his comms. Stand down, Drex. The prey is mine. Cerna's fleet had arrived. Drex sighed. He had no patience for politics, but he knew Cerna wouldn't leave without a confrontation. Stepping outside, he saw her ship descending, flanked by 2 smaller gunships. Cerna herself emerged moments later, armored from head to toe in obsidian plating, her reptilian eyes gleaming with amusement. You're quick, she admitted. But not quick enough. Drex crossed his arms. You're wasting time. The trail's fresh. We could fight, or we could find the human before someone else does. Cerna tilted her head, considering. She had numbers, but Drex had experience. Killing him outright would be a waste. Fine, she said. For now. They combed through the station together, piecing together what little evidence remained. Faint heat signatures indicated a single occupant had been here no more than an hour ago. Rations were missing. A docking bay had depressurized recently. Then they found the second message. This one wasn't written. It was carved, deep gouges in the steel, each stroke deliberate. You don't want this. Drex and Cerna exchanged glances. Whoever this human was, he wasn't running in fear. He was leaving a warning. A new alert flashed on their shared comms. Whisper had found something. Halfway across the sector, an old transport vessel was drifting in deep space, its distress beacon looping endlessly. By the time Drex and Cerna arrived, Whisper was already inside. The ship's crew had been executed with precision. No signs of struggle, no wasted movement. Whatever killed them had done so with terrifying efficiency. In the captain's quarters, a datapad lay on the desk, its last message frozen on the screen. Do not pursue. Drex exhaled slowly. This wasn't normal. He'd hunted warlords, assassins, and monsters, but never had a target warned its pursuers to turn back. Cerna frowned. What kind of man leaves messages instead of covering his tracks? Whisper, who had been silent until now, spoke in a voice like distant static. Not a man. Drex turned sharply. Then what? Whisper hesitated. That alone was unsettling. Whisper never hesitated. Then, with uncharacteristic softness, the shadowed figure answered. Something else. The transmission cut abruptly, and the lights flickered. For the first time in his long career, Drex Varn felt something unfamiliar. Doubt. The hunters weren't hunting prey. They were walking into a trap. The station drifted on the edge of known space, a forgotten relic swallowed by the void. It was ancient, older than any records the bounty hunters could access. Yet its system still hummed with a quiet, unsettling life. A single docking bay remained functional, as if waiting for visitors. The hunters approached in silence, their ships slipping through the darkness, drawn forward by the gravity of unanswered questions. Drex Varn was the first aboard, stepping onto the cold metal floor with practiced ease. His cybernetic enhancements adjusted to the low gravity, his visor scanning the dim corridors for movement. Behind him, Cerna Vex followed, her reptilian frame tensed, her clawed fingers hovering near the twin plasma blades at her hips. Whisper was already ahead, gliding through the shadows like a wraith, unseen but ever present. The station smelled of old air, of time pressing in from all sides. Ice rimed the walls where the environmental controls had failed, and the only illumination came from flickering emergency lights that pulsed in a slow, dying rhythm. The human was here. Drex knew it. The trail of encrypted signals, distress beacons, and carefully placed warnings had all led to this place. The question was, why? The bounty had demanded his death. No negotiations. No attempts at capture. It was an odd request. The council rarely ordered executions without a trial, even for the most dangerous criminals. And yet, here they were, called to end a man none of them had met. A distant sound, soft, deliberate footsteps. Drex raised a fist, signaling for silence. They moved as one, hunters honed by years of experience, slipping through the cold corridors without a word. The sound led them to a large chamber, once a command center, now stripped of anything useful. A single figure sat at the center of the room, his back to them, illuminated only by the pale glow of a console screen. He did not turn as they entered. Drex studied him carefully. The human was not what he expected. He wore no armor, bore no visible weapons. His clothes were simple, the kind a spacer might wear, dark fabric, reinforced at the seams, a jacket slightly too large for his frame. His hair was unkempt, his face hidden beneath shadow. Cerna's voice was the first to break the silence. Stand. Now. The human exhaled, slow and measured. He did not move. You should leave. Whisper materialized from the darkness, stepping into the faint light. Not an option. The human finally turned. His eyes were sharp, clear, but there was no fear in them. Instead, there was something else, something older than any of them had expected. Drex stepped forward. You're coming with us, one way or another. The human studied him. You don't know, do you? Know what? He smiled, but there was no humor in it. Why they want me dead? Cerna tensed. You're a threat. That's all that matters. To whom? The question hung in the air, heavier than the station's silence. Drex had no answer. The human leaned back, resting his hands on the arms of the chair. How much do you know about the war? Cerna scoffed. Which one? The first war. The one that never made it into your records. Drex frowned. There were no wars before the recorded conflicts of the Galactic Council. Not officially. The humans seemed to read his thoughts. Of course they wouldn't tell you. They erased it. All of it. Whisper spoke, their voice softer than usual. Erased what? The human's eyes flickered toward them, as if weighing whether they were ready to hear it. Me. Cerna's patience snapped. Enough riddles. If you're going to die, at least make it quick. She lunged, her plasma blades igniting mid-strike. She never reached him. The air around the human shifted, a pulse of something unseen but tangible. The station's lights flickered violently, and a force, silent and unstoppable, caught Cerna mid-air, suspending her like an insect trapped in amber. Her breath hitched as she struggled, but her body would not obey her. Drex stepped back, his grip tightening on his rifle. Whisper stood utterly still. The human rose slowly, stepping forward. Cerna, still held in place by whatever force bound her, was lowered gently to the floor, her breath coming in ragged gasps. "I don't want to kill you," the human said, "but I will if you try that again." Drex's mind raced. This was no ordinary human. No records had mentioned enhanced abilities, no indication that they were walking into something beyond their understanding. He forced himself to speak. "What are you?" The human studied him for a long moment before answering. "The last mistake the Council ever made." Whisper, always unreadable, tilted their head. "Explain." The human's gaze drifted past them, to something unseen, something buried in memory. "There was a war," he said. "Before the Council. Before the Empires. A war that nearly wiped everything away. It started when they found us." Drex exchanged a glance with Cerna, who had finally recovered, her hands flexing at her sides. She didn't attack again. The human continued. "They thought they could control us, that we were just another species to catalog, to rule. But humans don't work that way." His voice was quiet now, but no less powerful. "We fought back, harder than they ever expected." Cerna's voice was low. "And?" The human met her gaze. "And we won." The silence that followed was suffocating. Drex's throat was dry. "That's impossible. The Council has ruled for millennia. That's what they want you to believe." The human's expression darkened. "We tore them apart. Their first empire. Their fleets. Their cities. We burned everything they had down to the foundation. But they survived. And when the war was over, they made sure no one would remember." The weight of his words pressed down on them, like the station's decaying metal walls. Cerna's voice was hoarse. "Then what are you?" The human exhaled. "The only one they couldn't kill." The station groaned, as if reacting to his presence. Drex's instincts screamed at him to leave, to run, but his feet remained planted. The Council hadn't placed a bounty on a man. They had placed it on a ghost, a fragment of a history they had buried. And now that ghost was staring them down, waiting for their next move. The station felt smaller now, the weight of the revelation pressing against its cold metal walls. Drex, Cerna, and Whisper stood motionless, caught between their instincts and the impossible truth unraveling before them. The human, this anomaly, this relic of a war erased from history, watched them with quiet intensity. He was patient. He knew what came next. Drex's grip tightened on his weapon, his cybernetic enhancements feeding him a steady stream of tactical data. None of it useful. Every scenario ended the same way: failure. The human had already demonstrated power beyond anything the bounty hunters had prepared for. If he wanted them dead, they would be. That alone made Drex hesitate. Cerna exhaled sharply, breaking the silence. "If the Council really wanted you dead, why now? Why not centuries ago?" The human tilted his head slightly, as if amused by the question. "They thought they did." Whisper spoke next, their voice barely a whisper of static. "Explain." The human's fingers drummed against his forearm in thought. "After the war, the Council didn't just erase history, they erased me. They hunted down every soldier, every rebel, every last trace of the conflict, and wiped it from existence. I was the last." He exhaled, slow and measured. "They found me. I made them believe they won." Drex narrowed his eyes. "You went into hiding." The human smirked. "You could call it that. I let them think they had wiped the slate clean, lived in the cracks of their empire, watched as they built their illusion of peace. But something changed." Cerna crossed her arms, her claws tapping against her armor. Something big enough to make them start looking again. He nodded. The council isn't infallible. For centuries, they've kept order by controlling what people know, by deciding which histories are worth remembering. But cracks have started forming. Whispers of the old war have surfaced in places they can't silence. And if people learn what really happened, if they realize that humanity didn't lose, they revolt, Whisper finished. The human nodded. The council needs me dead before the truth spreads. That's why they sent the bounty to hunters like you, efficient, ruthless, no questions asked. They were counting on you killing me before you had time to think. Drex's stomach twisted. The bounty had been strange from the beginning, but now it was clear. The council hadn't just put a price on this man's head, they had gambled their entire empire on his silence. Cerna scowled. You expect us to just believe all this? The human met her glare without flinching. No, but you haven't pulled the trigger yet. Silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken doubt. Drex knew Cerna well enough to see the gears turning in her mind. She was a warlord, a survivor. She had made a life out of knowing which side to pick, and this was no different. The credits the council had promised were life-changing, but so was the knowledge they had just uncovered. Whispers shifted slightly, their presence barely more than a shadow in the dim light. If what you're saying is true, then the council won't stop at you. They'll come for anyone who hesitates. The human nodded. That includes you. Drex felt something cold settle in his chest. The council didn't tolerate loose ends. If they even suspected the hunters had spoken to the target, let alone hesitated, the bounty wouldn't just be for the human anymore. It would be for all of them. Cerna growled in frustration, pacing. We should kill you. The human didn't move. But you won't. She whirled on him, her reptilian eyes flashing with anger. Why not? His gaze was steady. Because you don't trust the council either. You've worked for them, seen the things they hide. You know I'm telling the truth. Drex felt the shift in the room. The human wasn't just pleading for his life, he was planting doubt, feeding the same instincts that had kept them alive in this business for so long. Trust no one. Never take a job at face value. Cerna cursed under her breath, looking to Drex. We leave now. We might be able to disappear before the council knows we hesitated. Drex hesitated. There was a time when he would have taken the shot, without question. But now, standing here, staring at the last remnant of a buried war, he realized something. They weren't the hunters anymore. They were the prey. The station's lights flickered again, and a distant alarm began to blare, a low, warning hum that sent a chill down Drex's spine. Whisper's head snapped up. Ships inbound. The human exhaled. Took them long enough. Drex's comm pinged with a priority alert. He checked it, feeling his stomach drop. Council enforcers. Full fleet. No chance of survival. Asterisk, asterisk. Cerna saw it too. They knew we talked to him. They never intended to let us walk away. The station trembled as distant explosions rocked its hull. The hunters had mere minutes before the council forces breached. The human took a slow step forward, his presence almost unnaturally steady. I have a way out. But you have to decide. Do you want to survive? Drex didn't hesitate. Yes. Cerna let out a frustrated snarl, but nodded. Fine. But if you're lying, I'll gut you myself. Whispers simply inclined their head, unreadable as ever. The human turned toward the far end of the room, where a sealed door awaited. Then let's go. We don't have much time. The station shuddered again, and the alarms grew louder. The hunt was over. Now, the war was about to begin. The corridor pulsed with warning lights, bathing the group in flickering red as they moved with purpose. The station trembled around them, the metal walls groaning under the pressure of the approaching council forces. Somewhere in the distance, automated defenses activated. Short bursts of plasma fire echoed through the hollow space, followed by the hiss of melting steel. They were running out of time. The human led the way, his steps measured, unfazed by the chaos unfolding around him. Drex kept close behind, his rifle at the ready, scanning every shadow for signs of ambush. Cerna's claws tapped anxiously against her sidearm, her tail flicking as she glanced back toward Whisper, who moved with their usual silent precision. A distant explosion rocked the station, sending vibrations up through the floor. The scent of scorched metal filled the air. The council wasn't just sending enforcers, they were tearing this place apart. They didn't want to fight. They wanted a grave. Cerna snarled, her patience fraying. "Where the hell are you leading us?" The human didn't slow. "To my ship." Drex narrowed his eyes. "You have a ship?" "Of course I do." The human glanced over his shoulder, an almost amused glint in his eye. "Did you think I was just waiting here to die?" Cerna scoffed, but didn't argue. The station trembled again, and this time, the sound of reinforced bulkheads being breached rang through the walls. The enforcers had arrived. Drex's comm unit crackled, a decrypted signal forcing its way through his system. It was short-clipped. "Surrender. There is no escape, ****. Cerna got the same message. She bared her teeth. "They want us alive." Whisper, silent until now, finally spoke. "Not for long." Drex knew they were right. The council didn't take risks. If they had orders to capture instead of kill, it only meant one thing: interrogation, then execution. The council couldn't afford loose ends. They turned a corner, and suddenly the corridor opened into a vast docking bay. Or, at least, what remained of one. The metal framework had been hollowed out, stripped by time and scavengers, leaving a skeletal expanse of walkways leading toward a single, intact docking platform. And there, waiting for them, was the ship. It was sleek, dark, and unlike anything Drex had ever seen before. The design was ancient, yet the hull pulsed with an energy that made his skin crawl. The ship was alive in a way no machine should be. Cerna stopped in her tracks. "That's not human tech." The human smirked. "No, it's not." Drex didn't ask how he had acquired it. The answer didn't matter right now. What mattered was getting off this station before the council turned them into dust. They rushed toward the ship, but the instant they stepped onto the docking bridge, the first wave of enforcers arrived. Black-clad soldiers spilled into the bay, weapons raised. Their armor bore no insignia, no identifying marks. They weren't just regular council forces. These were executioners. Cerna cursed. They sent the best. The executioners didn't hesitate. They opened fire. Drex dove behind a crate as plasma bolts seared through the air. Cerna returned fire, her twin pistols spitting bursts of red light that found their marks, dropping 2 enforcers before the rest adjusted. Whisper vanished into the shadows, their presence flickering like a ghost as they maneuvered unseen. The human, however, didn't take cover. He stood in the open, facing the onslaught with an eerie calm. Then, the air around him rippled. A force, invisible yet undeniable, erupted outward. The executioners hesitated just for a moment, but it was enough. The human raised a hand, and in an instant, the gravity shifted. The enforcers were lifted off their feet, their bodies yanked upward, as if the laws of physics had abandoned them. Weapons tumbled from their hands, their limbs flailed uselessly, and then, without warning, the force collapsed. They hit the ground hard. Cerna didn't waste the opportunity. She emptied her clips into their prone forms before they could recover. Drex exhaled, his pulse hammering. "You're full of surprises." The human didn't respond. His focus was on the second wave of enforcers charging toward them. But this time he didn't wait. He raised his hand again, and reality itself seemed to bend. The enforcers faltered mid-step, their movements sluggish, their weapons heavy. They tried to fire, but the bolts of plasma crawled through the air as if time itself had thickened. Cerna watched in fascinated horror. "What the hell are you?" The human lowered his hand, and time snapped back to normal. The enforcers collapsed, unconscious before they even hit the ground. "I'm the reason they're afraid," he said simply. Drex didn't press further. There would be time for questions later, if they survived. They sprinted onto the ship. The human moved to the controls with the ease of someone who had flown this vessel 1,000 times. The ship responded instantly, its engines humming to life. Outside, the station shuddered violently. More explosions. More destruction. The council wasn't just trying to stop them. They were erasing every trace of this place, of this event, of him. The docking bay doors began to close. If they weren't gone in seconds, they never would be. The ship surged forward. For a brief, terrifying moment, Drex thought they wouldn't make it. The closing doors loomed ahead, the gap narrowing too fast. But the human didn't flinch. He tapped a single control, and the ship blurred. In the blink of an eye, they were through. The station fell away behind them, swallowed by the explosion that consumed it whole. Silence filled the cockpit. Suna finally spoke, her voice hoarse. "We're dead men." Drex let out a slow breath. "Not yet." Whisper tilted their head. "They will never stop hunting us." The human turned from the controls, his expression unreadable. "No, they won't." Drex met his gaze. "Then what now?" The human leaned back, his eyes dark with something ancient. "Now," he said, "we make them afraid.